Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I want to talk to you about the latest episode of The Flash. It was the conclusion of the Armageddon event, and it was called Armageddon Part 5. So, the episode starts off with Joe! Joe's back! And there's a scene of Joe in his house talking to Barry on the phone, which I guess was the other side of the conversation that we saw at the end of the previous episode. I was very psyched about this. I like the Joe character. I think Jesse Martin's the best actor on the show, actually. And it's not long before Barry shows up, having run all the way from Star Labs to see Joe, who he, of course, is very happy to see. And at that point, what happens is Barry starts explaining to him why he's so happy to see him and what Thawne did and everything about Reverse Flashpoint and all that stuff. But before that conversation could go on for too long, their reunion is interrupted by Damien Dark, who says that he got pulled into the real timeline back to 2021, probably because Flash was holding the time stone, which I guess was associated with him or something like that. But he says he doesn't expect to be there for long. He thinks he's going to fade away soon. And he asks Barry for the time stone back so that he can make sure that his daughter lives in this timeline. Now, we know she's alive. I don't know what that was quite about because we already know she's alive. I guess maybe he wanted to see her. I don't know what his goal was, but he said he didn't expect to be there much longer. He was surprised that he was even there. And he figured while he was there, he would get the time stone and see if that could help him finish whatever it is he's supposed to be doing, or understand why he's there, whatever. Anyway, so Barry gives it to him and says, thank you for everything you're doing. And he says, well, I'm just a father. And I thought it was very cool. I think the guy that plays Damien Dark's a very good actor. And as I said in the last review, I'm a fan of redemption arcs. I'm a fan of seeing a character redeemed. And that's what this was for Dark. And I thought it was great. And I thought, oh, man, he was redeemed and now he's going to go back to his old ways because after he helped Barry. But no, he didn't. He just was like, you know what? I'm committed to this and I want to make sure Nora's okay. And if it's my fate to then disappear, then so be it. I just thought it was very cool. Anyway, while this is happening, Thawne menaces the CCPD and is confronted in the process by Mia Queen, who has shown up in Central City because she seems to think that Thawne knows where her brother is, William. He'd been kidnapped in a previous episode. I guess it was of Arrow. Thawne soon gets the upper hand, pinning her to a wall, and is about to kill her when Flash shows up and takes him down, only to have Thawne ask Flash to save him from being wiped out by the timeline reset, which the team then actually considers doing. So let's break that down. Mia Queen shows up asking Thawne where William is because she thinks he knows. William, of course, had been kidnapped last time we saw him. Thawne feigns ignorance, or I shouldn't say feigns ignorance. Thawne claims ignorance, and then when Barry shows up, he reveals that the timeline reset is leading to him being erased from the timeline, and he wants Barry to help him. And the team actually talks about, okay, are we going to try to save him? And so they're actually considering it, which is kind of weird. But anyway, Iris confronts Mia about why she hasn't asked for her mother's help finding William, and it turns out that it's because her mom wouldn't approve of her methods, which apparently involve killing people, which Iris kind of lectures her about, only to have Mia tell Iris that she's a fool if she lets Thawne live after how he made a fool of her in his timeline, his fake timeline. Caitlin lets Thawne know that he only has a couple of hours left, and he taunts her about how she's too good to let him die, and that he knows that because she never moved on when her fiance died, and she tells him he's wrong. She says that one of the first things she learned in med school was that sometimes a patient dies, and that if he's looking for someone to fret over him dying, he needs to look somewhere else. After which she tells Barry that she thinks they need to let him die. Barry then confronts Thawne himself and asks why he hates him. And it turns out that it's because Barry humiliated him in the future on the eve of his greatest moment when he was poised to make his grand debut as a speedster, but Barry upstaged him. So this kind of goes along with the comics in that, as I was saying before, Thawne originally was an admirer of Barry's from the future. And then he wanted to be Barry. He wanted to be the same as Barry, but be adored and be a speedster and be a hero. But somewhere along the line, something went wrong, and he ended up resenting Barry and hating Barry and wanting to be the opposite and wanting to hurt him or kill him or mess with him. And so that's essentially what they're saying is the same thing that happened in the show. So that was cool. They narrowed it down to one specific event. I don't know that it was one specific event in the comics, but anyway, it's following the comics in that way. Barry asks him then, what are you going to do if you live, if we save you? And he says, I'm going to continue my life's work, which is trying to kill you. So Barry decides at that point that he should be allowed to die. But when Joe finds out that Barry, Iris, and Kate all agree that that Thawne should die, he strongly reminds them that heroes don't turn their backs on people who need help and who ask for help, regardless of their past, causing Barry to realize that he's right and announce that they can, in fact, save Thawne if they take his speed away. Now, I thought that this was the best scene of the episode, and it's the best scene the show has had in a long time, because Joe was absolutely right. And as I was watching this with my wife, she was like, gee, why would they even think about letting him live? She's like, I wouldn't. And I said, well, then you wouldn't be a hero. And she said, no, I'd be an anti-hero. You're right. I couldn't do that if that's what it takes to be a hero. And I suppose not everybody could, but Barry is a hero. And Joe is absolutely right. Heroes do not turn their back on people who are asking for their help and who need help. Period. End of story. And that includes Thawne, whatever he's done in the past and whatever he might do in the future. You don't just let someone die. Now, that doesn't mean that if they're about to hurt someone and the only way to stop them is to kill them, then you might have to kill them or not save them if they're in a situation where somebody else who didn't do something wrong or who was their victim is going to die. If you stop to save the bad guy, then obviously in that situation you let them die. But all things being equal, where there's nothing dire going on, for anyone else, and they say, please save me, if you're a hero, that's what you do. So I was totally in line with that. Joe was totally right. It was a great scene because Joe got really mad, and he was right to be mad, and everything he said was right, and it was just a great scene. And of course, Barry and Iris realize that he's right, and they come up with a plan to, in fact, save him by taking away his speed, which I guess is the thing that's causing him to be at odds with the time stream. They don't really explain that, though, but there you go. Now, Despero catches wind of this, and it doesn't really sit well with him, because he's afraid that Thawne could still cause a mass destruction event if he's allowed to live, and that he must die so that he can't. And even though Barry explains to him, no, he's not going to have his speed, and he said, well, he's gotten his speed back before, which is true. So he sets Mia upon Team Flash by, I guess, kind of controlling her, as he himself attacks Barry, who seems to have some cool new abilities, like Speed Force clones and Emperor Palpatine type Force lightning that he can radiate at will as kind of a shield, which I guess we kind of saw in a previous episode when he was in midair and sent out that lightning burst, but I figured it was a one-time thing. Apparently it's not. Apparently he can do this now whenever, so that was interesting. Mia ends up snapping out of her Despero trance when Iris sort of stands up to her, and upon realizing this, Despero decides he'll just kill Thawne himself by destroying the whole city, which again, I wasn't sure what that was about, but that was his plan. And in order to counteract this, Team Flash discusses how are they going to stop him? And at that point, Chuck steps up with the golden boots. Flash finally has the gold boots that he's always had in the comics, that I was super pissed off that he didn't have on the 1991 show, because the suit was otherwise so comic accurate and so cool, and which this Flash has never had, despite his suit eventually becoming otherwise comics accurate. And they're finally doing it. They finally gave him the gold boots, and now he looks comics accurate, and it's great. Now, the explanation behind the boots is that they enabled Barry to somehow diffuse Despero's powers, or to refocus Despero's powers once he'd absorbed them otherwise or something. I wasn't clear on that, but there you go. And they're made out of material from that machine that they were using against Godspeed before. I don't know. I didn't explain it. They didn't really explain it, but I don't care because he has the gold boots. So he does this, and it causes Despero to bug off to his own time period. At which point, Barry arrives back at Star Labs just in time to take Thawne's speed away, which I wasn't really sure how they did. I guess he hit him with lightning, just like Black Lightning had done to him. And this, of course, does in fact save his life, which Thawne wastes no time flipping out about, because now he says, "Save my life? You took away my life, because now I don't have my speed," but whatever. So he lives, and he was carted off to Argus. Team Flash then celebrates all of this at a club they've rented out. And Damian shows up telling Joe that he doesn't know why he still hasn't been winked out, when Joe tells him, maybe you have more to do, at which point he gives Joe the time stone, telling him that he may need it at some point, which was interesting. At which point he winks out and shows up in a nexus kind of area, similar to like a nether region between the world and the afterlife or whatever, where he sees Nora before, for a moment, before she goes right back to the regular world, landing at the club as opposed to wherever in the world she'd been brought to the Nexus from for that moment, much to her confusion, at which point Joe takes it upon himself to take her aside to tell her the story of how her dad saved her, all of which was quite moving, actually. So I guess she was wherever she was, in her kitchen, at the beach, who knows, and Damian gets whacked into this nether region, and she gets pulled there to see him for a moment, and then he winks out, and she goes back to the world, but not where she was, at the club where Team Flash was for some reason. Anyway, but it was just very cool, because again, Damian was being cool, and Joe was like appreciative of that and recognized it, and that was cool, because a lot of times, these characters in shows and whatever try to redeem themselves, and people don't believe them, and it hurts their efforts to redeem themselves, and sometimes sets them back. So I like it when the other characters acknowledge that, hey, they're trying, or hey, they've accomplished some sort of change, and it was cool that Joe was the latter as opposed to the former. Barry then says some hero stuff to the team about, hey, we came a long way, we did some cool stuff, we're on a roll, whatever, and that ends the episode. So, now the show is off until next year, I guess January 11th. At least that's when the CW shows are coming back. I don't know if Flash is coming back exactly, but anyway, it's off until 2022, and when they come back, we're going to be treated to more Bart and Nora and more timeline shenanigans, which, I don't know how I feel about that. I think they overdo the timeline thing on all of these shows, certainly on this one, and I don't know. The characters are popular, I guess, so they keep bringing them back, but I don't know. They're playing fast and loose with it, because every time they come back, they risk changing the timeline. And the first time you see Nora, they're like, "Oh, you're going to change the timeline," but now they're like, they don't care anymore. They just paid lip service to it in the beginning, and now they pop back all the time, apparently, Iris says. So I don't know. We'll see. But that's really it. The only other thing I would say is that, again, they spent too much time with the masks off. Like the whole time Thawne is talking to Barry and Caitlin or whatever, he's not wearing the mask. Like, why? Just put the mask on him. And same thing with Barry. He takes the mask off when he's talking. It's like, no, if you've got the suit on, put the mask on. Like, what? Anyway, that's it. I'll be back with more reviews when the show returns. Until then, I wish you peace and long life.